Jai Hind and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Aadi. Myself and General Shankar are present with me today in this talk about the Belt and Road Initiative of China. We've covered the Chinese society, we've covered the Chinese economy, we've covered the Chinese demographic problem that they are facing today. We also thought that the Chinese keep touting around the Belt and Road Initiative, especially since the Chinese president came into power in 2012, 2013. He's got links with over 160 countries with an investment of reportedly $1.5 trillion. And reportedly about $400 billion is already spent. I'd like to call it stuck, but let's wait and watch. The implementation of these projects was a little too hasty in certain times without sufficient consideration of the long-term economic benefits to both China as well as the host country, as time is telling us today. On many occasions, these projects rely too much on the support of the government, which is locally present there. So if the government changes, the entire attitude changed as well. Another extreme is sometimes the implementation agencies that were appointed to take these projects further were putting too much emphasis into the benefits to China, as selfish as China can be. And the interest of local governments, communities, companies, and so on and so forth was always kept on a back burner. Some countries are positive about this, but are not willing to put even a single dime into this whole thing. They take for granted that the Chinese are going to, benefit the most out of it. So the Chinese should be paying the most out of it. It makes quite a bit of sense. The BRI projects, as we all might be aware, use Chinese labor, equipment, and capital, which gives the Chinese an immense clout over the host country on the ground. It deprives the low-income countries, for example, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, and so on and so forth, many examples around us, with even a trickle of employment or any opportunity to do something within the Belt and Road Initiative taken within their countries. These projects are not transparent by any sense. They are tainted with corruption, which is the Chinese way. And the China only benefactor trend line, which is the baseline for any project that the Chinese come in. Most of the African nations are asking China to forgive their debt. These countries include, countries like Angola, Nigeria, Congo, Zambia, Botswana, so on and so forth. The Chinese have lent in about $143 billion to 49 African governments and their state-owned companies between 2000 and 2017. And as I said earlier, these countries are asking for Chinese to forgive their debt. There's no lack of suspicion, and even the public criticism within the host countries, as well as the international community towards the Belt and Road Initiative. I'd like to say this, that the dream was mouthful and it was sold to these countries, showcasing a demand that probably did not exist. News came in recently which talked about a Malaysian cancellation of a Chinese project worth $1.8 billion, which was supposed to connect Kuala Lumpur with Singapore. It is being considered a threat, a challenge, an aggressive posture. And we need to understand how much all of this is true, really, to form an opinion. And I said to you earlier, I have with me Lieutenant General Ravi Shankar, a retired Director General from the Artillery, a strategic thinker, and a writer, to take us through the journey of the Belt and Road Initiative. Sir, thank you so much, and pardon the little long introduction, but this is something that I did a little research on.
Oh, no, fine. I think you got it spot on. You highlighted the issues concerning the Belt and Road. It's a very interesting concept. Now, just to put it in perspective, I call it a drive with a loose belt on a bumpy road, right? But having said that, the Belt and Road is not only all about money and economics, it's also about geostrategy and power. So we can discuss it.
Sure, sir. Let's talk about the infrastructure bit part of it, sir. Try to, begin with the entire story. Since history, this has been touted as, and as a matter of fact, sold by the Chinese as one of the biggest infrastructure projects ever to hit the world economy or the world space. As an overview of this entire thing, did the Chinese go wrong right at the beginning?
See, in terms of scale and pace, they started it about say 2010 or so. with a big plan, right? In terms of scale, I don't think this is the biggest one because I think the colonial powers had bigger projects. Only thing is, the powers developed it slowly as the colonies stabilized. They had their projects. These people started it with a bang with surplus cash they had, right? And they went this thing. In terms of doing the right, diligence, whether the projects were good, bad, or ugly, there are two shades to it. First, they went into a lot of countries which wanted money and were risk prone. And those were the ones where you could easily convince them that to take the BRI up. And they needed the rulers there for whatever political reasons locally wanted to show something. That's one. Number two, this BRI was rolled out at a time when China's equation with the world was good. Right? People were generally supportive of the BRI. But then things have turned the other way around. The third problem which the BRI has countered is that the projects per se were, of course, overpriced, corrupt, and all that, which you said, which is coming out now in Pakistan in big manner because CPEC is almost 50% of the BRI, and there whatever happens reflects everywhere else. But the projects themselves were not viable. They were not. For example, just take that Hambantota port. Hambantota existed for long, right? Everyone knew that Hambantota will not succeed, yet the government and this thing went against everything. So there are a lot of risk in the viability of the project. When I say viability, the project would have been completed, but is it useful? In Montenegro, they built a road. It is called No Road to Nowhere. So there's so many of these projects which are not useful. So what's the point of having a project and then of course there's this problem of the Chinese model. You see, when a project comes up, everyone wants to be part of the project, and then the local economy kicks in, and the local economy supports the project, and it goes up. And if there's a problem in the project also, if the local economy is tied up and the locals are tied up, they see the project through because it's in their interest to do so. Whereas in this model, you're getting everyone from outside, you're making everyone do it. The local people are just seeing this coming up. It will come after 10 years, 15 years, whenever it comes up. At that time, it is expected to be beneficial to them. It is not participative. Okay. You wait for 10 years to say, okay, this power plant will come, or this road will come, or this railway line will come, or this port will come up. Well, today, people don't have interest in it. So it's a bridge too far, or say, it's a chimera over the horizon. And so if it gets into a problem, no one is bothered about it. They say, like, we had this thing. If it had come, fine. If it doesn't come, we continue with our life. So these are the issues. Then, of course, there are debt modeling and all, which you can discuss.
Absolutely. So I'd like to actually take something that you said very interesting forward, that it has also got a geostrategic base to the BRI. Do you think that the Chinese actually focused a little more on towards the geostrategic base than the geo-economic part of it?
I think 50-50. They thought economics, so we will make it happen. The geostrategy will come in. You see, if you look at the colonial powers, they grabbed power through such projects. It was trade, which, like Vasco da Gama came here for trade.
East India Company.
Trade. Yeah, it was trade. Trade turned into colony. Colony turned into, the British rule here. So same thing, same model. But there's another modern model in this. When you say 160 countries, okay, typically you get this 160 countries as a block to support you in UN and other forums. So you need about 180 to 200 countries supporting you to get an overall majority in any of these forums. So by nature, the other countries, even if 20-30 of them come towards this viewpoint, and hoping that 160 of these which are under China vote for China. So you can then dominate all the world bodies. Okay, whether it's WHO, IMF, whatever. IMF, of course, a Western funded model, but still, you can, UN. So that is how it is. That is the geostrategic part of it. And then you get the influence.
Hmm.
So you start influencing. The moment you get influence, then you shut others out. You shut their trade out. You tell them, look, he shouldn't come here if you want this facility. That's how it works.
It's a leverage sort of a thing.
Yeah, leverage, huge leverage.
Hmm. So
and then of course, like we say there's the string of pearls around India.
Yeah.
So you start threatening your adversaries also that way. Like for example, Latin America was supposed to be China's backyard.
Hmm.
US backyard. US backyard. Sorry, China has made huge inroads into it.
Yes.
That's how it is.
Venezuela, which has a huge problem with the states, is being supported by China.
Is now sponsored by China.
Of course.
Same thing with Iran, Pakistan. So those countries which have had problem with the other existing system, China has made inroads there to form its own alliances and its own sphere of influence.
So, at the end of the first answer, you mentioned debt, and this is something which is most talked about: debt to equity transfer and stuff like that. We saw that in Sri Lanka. God only knows what they own in Pakistan, because I don't think even the prime minister would exactly be able to put his finger on what all is owned. They've just transferred now Karachi to them. How far, for what time, this, that, it's not known very, very clearly. What are the rights? What are this thing? But it's known that the Chinese are sitting in Karachi now. So the debt to equity transfer is something that the Chinese have been doing and plan to do even further. The question is that is it actually good for the Chinese? Because the baseline country could not earn anything out of it and pay the Chinese. How are the Chinese going to pay for themselves?
See, debt to equity transfer is the worst thing which has happened to China. Let me put it upfront. I'll explain how. You talked of Hambantota. I think a couple of projects in Pakistan also have gone debt to equity way, and a few other places also this is on the cards. Now, what is the problem? As far as China was giving debt, building a project, it was okay. They were just getting their interest and happy about it. And because their Chinese labor was employed, their material and everything, their economy was going. The whole idea was you make the project, give it to the host country and be done with it and let them maintain. Okay. China built or started all their projects on that note. And you know China, it's never, the quality is not great. And if you have to do a debt-based infrastructure project, your approach is different.
You'll make sure the quality.
Then you say, no, the quality might not be that good. You don't want a quality that good because then they'll come back to you and say, maintain it for us.
Yeah.
Okay. So you milk the recipient of for maintenance also thereafter. You know, your AMC and X, Y, Z. But the moment it is converted to debt, you start owning it. You own the problem. Earlier, the problem was of the host country. Today, Hambantota is yours. What do you do with it?
Nothing.
Nothing.
True.
Nothing. If you have an airport which doesn't function, it has got all defects. Who do you go for AMC? Yourself. You're part of the problem now. You're no more apart from the problem. So the moment this debt to equity transfer has happened in any BRI project, China has lost out. Now you're saddled with that project. Everyone thinks, oh, look, now China has taken over Hambantota, China has taken over a project, or China has taken over a port to operate it, and it will have influence and all that. But look at the other side, that the problems of that port is also China's. And China didn't plan, there's a difference between the infrastructure China builds for itself and for others. And we all know that. So what it built for others is now theirs. So they have to pay for it. Right? Then the second thing is that, okay, even if you have equity, if it doesn't earning you, what's the use of that equity? If overall the return on investment is zero, there's no point. Okay, and if you are on equity, and if that parent state says, please forgive debt, you will have to forgive your own debt. Your own equity collapses. So a major problem of the BRI today is taking over equity. It's not going to. China can't get out of it.
I mean, the property developer wouldn't want to own so much property because he's going
Yeah, firstly he won't, and he has to now. He has to maintain that property from his own pocket. It's
yeah.
of everything is own now. He has ownership. The only thing he'll get is brickbats from people who are staying there or around it. Whereas earlier he would just build it, hand it over to someone, and keep going. And that someone will keep doing what he wants. The local government has now put the problem onto China. And this is happening in so many projects.
Yeah. Hambantota is
Yeah.
a prime example. So
Yeah.
the Chinese tried
Prime
putting
example.
their submarines there,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
not
That's
protected.
the starkest example, but there are more.
Absolutely. So, we started with the beginning of this entire, BRI projects. And one of the biggest things that within the little research that I was trying to do, and I read a couple of your articles also on this, is that the Chinese started off with coal. 90% of their projects till 2015 were coal powered, basically power related projects. Today, with the Chinese moving away from coal and the environmental issues which are going to come across, that seems like another big hole in the Chinese BRI as well.
Yes, it is. It's going to be a major problem for everyone.
Mm.
When they started, all their excess capacity of coal-fired plants, they were exporting. Okay, so that the, there's also a rumor that coal-fired plants which were being shut down in China were being refurbished and erected elsewhere.
Uh-huh.
That also has come about in a few places. So they transferred their environmental problems out of China into someone else. One. Number two, Xinjiang has a lot of coal. The entire logic of CPC I've written somewhere is to untap the coal in China, in Xinjiang. That's not useful for China, but if it comes down through CPC and goes into the African belt, then you export coal, you exported the plant, you export coal. Now the problem which is going to happen is that is almost a no-go today, Xinjiang, with the way the geopolitics have gone and that is not going the way it is going. That coal will stay where it is. That's my assessment. So all these coal-fired plants, where do they people get coal from? China can't give coal because China needs coal itself, right? It's struggling without fossil fuels. Where do these people go to coal for? So, and in this kind of with the climate change and environment and all, they're going to. There's an analysis.
Yeah.
I think I did this 2 years back or 3 years back. I don't remember. Uh, Around 40 to 50% of CPEC is, or maybe even 55% of CPEC is all coal-fired plants and energy. My analysis at that time indicated Pakistan, from being one of the least polluted countries, will become one of the most polluted countries when CPEC finishes. And all the okay, so who pays for that? And the import bill on Pakistan is huge. The per capita rate of the electricity through the PPAs or power purchase agreements are economical. No one is going to pay them. There's a circular debt happening. So the whole thing is going to collapse on Pakistan. And this will happen everywhere. Okay. So they're facing energy problems, they're facing sourcing problems, they're facing cost problems and capacity problems. Most of these power plants are now running under capacity. So there are issues that I don't think this will succeed. I mean, there will be the three warfare strategy coming up and saying BRI is a great success and this and that and all that. But if you notice, 2019 was the last conference.
Yeah.
After that, no conference, nothing has happened. No, you don't see BRI in news anywhere, except cancellations.
That, of course, yes. Recently,
Yeah,
we saw that.
yeah.
That's so it's showing up as a bit of a challenge for the Chinese. So
Yeah.
I'd like to also highlight the local politics in the country. For example, in Pakistan, I mean, it's keen. Everybody's aware of the reason why the Chinese are moving away from the port in Balochistan, Gwadar. Local politics is not allowing the Chinese to move forward. There are huge protests against the Chinese in Nepal. They faced a backlash within Myanmar before the junta came in. Quite a bit of challenges in terms of the local politics. And I also mentioned in the introduction that when the government changes, there's a lot that changes along with it.
Yeah, I
Some
agree with
countries
you.
have called the project, we don't need, it's useless, we don't need it, it's too expensive, close it. So, what is
Yeah,
the
that's a fact. The point is that, see, when the BRI came in, China were dealing with governments which were favorable to them.
yeah?
And China's image to these governments and to the people was favorable. But 4, 5 years down the line, the governments have changed because most of these governments are corrupt. And the relationship between China and those governments were seen to be corrupt and to be robbing them of their fundamental necessities. So the mood has changed against China. And wherever China has gone, it is now very established. They're not bothered about the local politics.
Hmm.
That they leave it to the local politicians. Now, if that local politicians has gone, a new one comes, well, he will continue with the project because he's got no choice. But it's a sovereign guarantee, right? It's a state-to-state dealing, so he'll continue with it. But his enthusiasm is not there. The new guy, and new guy will always review if there's a project which he feels deems to be too costly, they'll cancel it. That's happened even in Maldives. It
Yes.
happened in Malaysia. Okay, it's happened in one of the African countries, either Kenya or
Kenya,
Tanzania,
sir.
one of them.
Yeah.
Kenya. They said, look, only mad people will take loans at this rate. Okay. So, except probably Sri Lanka, where they've gone in hook, line, and sinker into the Chinese trap. Others are now very clear that they don't want to get involved with this. And they're doing it at least cost. Now, most projects are at scaled on levels.
Basics. Hmm.
Yeah, the earlier conception and the vision and the outlays of the projects have gone down quite a bit. So the BRA itself is watered down, and though they say they've spent 400 billion, 300 billion, 2 trillion, or whatever the figure is, they're all question marks.
Knowing the
Who
Chinese,
spent where? Who? Yeah, because there's no transparency in anything.
if they've spent even more, they'll try and hide it out.
Yeah, there is right, and there are hidden debts also in this whole story.
Yeah.
Lot of debt is not on the balance sheet of the government, it's on the balance sheet of some special purpose vehicles. So when that is also there, people don't know, there's total opacity about the money going in and coming out, so there are going to be problems.
So, sir, risk assessment, as per what you're trying to say, is a big failure. And I'd like to add, you mentioned that and I had asked you with the second question is that the Chinese took the geo strategy to be a this thing, and you mentioned it was they were trying to create a balance around it. So, do you think they went wrong in their risk assessment with regards one the viability of the project, the local politics of that project, and when everybody talks about the Chinese to be thinking 50 years ahead, didn't it come to their mind that the local government might one day just change and might just
Yeah,
have to
I
move?
think they would have known about it, but like I said, they went in with the idea of debt. You have debt, take interest back.
Hmm.
They probably were not interested in converting into equity or taking responsibility of that. And they didn't expect COVID to come in. Oh, okay, any project will get delayed, say 10, 15, 20%, and
Hmm.
there'll be some cost overrun, and they would have tided over it in the normal conditions, negotiation and all that. But COVID was a dampener. There is no risk assessment for COVID. If a country is in a bad shape, I mean, look, China went in with many of these countries, which were the poorest of countries, with greatest risk assessment, risk indicators, and yet lent them and went in for BRI. Okay. Uh, so, and they went in with a China model without understanding the local politics. It's not a matter of risk assessment alone. The risk they didn't assess was COVID.
Hmm.
Right now, COVID came. What did COVID do? The moment COVID came, all the Chinese had to be repatriated back. The work stopped. Items didn't come from China. Trade had stopped. So the whole project cooled down. 1 year, 1.5 years, the project cools down. To revive it is a problem. Debt
Correct.
is a issue. You know, people couldn't repay money, so they said we can't give you. In any case, if the chap had money, he would have started the project on his own, not this thing, right? Others like Australia with Victoria State, they inked a deal of BRI, which was later on cancelled. Attitudes changed, right? So whole lot of things people say renegotiate. We don't want BRI. Projects got brought down. So it's not only risk assessment initial which was at fault. The pandemic, you know, turned things around in a negative way for the Chinese.
Hmm.
And this is something which I've been saying. As long as the pandemic is around, the Chinese will not prosper. You and I might prosper, they will not. They still, even now in the city Delhi, there have been outbreaks which have not been controlled. They're going into
Beijing
lockdown.
today has reported 45 cases, sir.
Must be. So there are a whole lot of this thing. Their zero COVID policy is today a matter of national prestige. They can't get away from that. They're not prepared to live with the virus like you and I do. Ultimately, this virus will seep down, and it is also being now proven that vaccines are useless. So they will continue lockdown. They will continue X, Y, Z like this, and that BRI will be also locked down. Their economy will be locked down. They're going to get hit. There's no doubt about it.
The virus, of course, indeed, you wrote, and I agree with it, Chernobyl of China, and it's going to be something that will be remembered for a long, long time to come. A small, unseen pathogen took down a whole potential superpower. Having said that, I think I discussed this with you offline as well, but I look at it in a very, very simple way. Guy earned $100. He planned his investments for about 50, 60. Fair enough, he was going well, he was getting some interest and this and that. Now his earnings are reducing, people are decoupling from China, businesses are moving out. uh, Leave everything apart, the virus has actually shown the true face of China, untrustworthy. It's not about the origin of the virus, but what Chinese tried to sell to the world, underwear, masks, and so on and so forth, and everybody realized it. It was wide in the open. How does that particular factor hit their so-called comprehensive national power in one aspect of it, and the second aspect of it, as I was saying, his earning capacity is reduced. How does he still service his investments worth 50, 60 rupees if his earnings are going to be matching the same?
I mean, look, I don't know. To be very honest, just look at this country. It's got a very high debt to GDP ratio.
Correct,
Their entire
254%.
property, everything is on debt, and it gives out debt to others. How do you balance it? I don't know. And it gives the debt to people who can't repay back.
GP back.
How do you balance it? And then you invest in a project you feel is going to give you return of investment. It doesn't give you. How do you balance that? Then you break all your tech companies and your high earners, and you take money out of them and give it to the poorer people, right? How do you balance that? How do you that tech company's wealth is lost? So it's going to, how do you balance that? Okay, then your demography is declining. There's not enough consumption. In fact, today only I read in South China Morning Post, even in rural areas, their birth rates have gone down. So if people are not there to work, people are not there to eat, how consume, how will their GDP go up? How will their economy go up? So there are a lot of questions, right? And then there's common prosperity and all this. Their GDP is going to go down, and their economy is going to have a problem. BRI is just one part of this whole facet. But which is that straw which is going to break the camel's back, or will it be broken, is the question.
Yeah, of course.
Let me also caution you. A lot of people have said that China will collapse. They've been saying this for the past 20 years. Nothing has happened. Even now, I can say that China will collapse because of all these factors. Very logically, I've said, but Chinese have always come out of it. Let us see which rabbit they'll pull out of the hat now.
Xi Jinping, sir?
We'll see. Let's see how it happens. See, just like Evergrande, everyone knows Evergrande has got huge 300 billion debt. It can't pay nothing, but yet it is paying each
Installment at the last.
time
Hmm.
at the last moment. Who's paying? Who's getting money from? Where are they getting money? The government is bailing them out. How far will the government bail out whom? Because already there are about 8 to 10 other companies which are in trouble.
In line, yes.
Yeah, let's see. Interesting times, huh?
There's a lot to learn, sir. But I
Yeah.
find quite fascinating the fact that a country in debt is giving debt who owns debt from other countries as well. I
Yes.
mean, they say that the Chinese own one third of the American debt. Um, Hard to prove, but that's what is kind of mentioned. Um, we also brought out the debt to GDP ratio, although it came down a little bit from 256% to 254%. Having said that, their own economy, which is tumbling down after the China virus, is going to take a little time for them to kind of balance it out. How did the world not see this?
Look,
That's
I this is something which I can't answer. You need to ask an economist to answer this. Uh, it to me it looks like a Ponzi scheme. It is great if it continues to grow. The moment it stops, it will collapse. I don't know. I mean, this is out of my depth, but I find it funny. Your whole system is in debt, and you give debt to others, and they can't repay you back, and they want debt forgiveness. Where is all the cash in China? I mean, it beats me.
what do you
Is it
say? Sorry, please.
is it pure financial management, and then your markets are disrupted? One of the investment bankers here locally said, "Look, today the scene is that people are decoupling from China. They don't mind taking a bit of a loss at this point of time. They'll decouple. So if their supply chains are disrupted now, it is expected. It is happening. The disruption of supply chains is also decoupling from China. Maybe in 2 3 years it will start changing. So if the decoupling happens in the next 3 to 4 years by about 10 to 15%, and BRI kicks you by about 5 to 10%, and other things happen, you are in a problem. I don't
Evergrande.
see how they're going to come out of it. Yeah, they'll not collapse, but they'll not be the kind of power we are thinking it, the economic power. Already there are a lot of people who say they'll not overtake this US economy.
Yes.
But let's see.
It just came to my mind, sir, and this might just throw a little light on the lack of study that is done by the Chinese for various different projects. There is a metro that goes from the Shanghai airport to the main city. This thing was conceptualized by the Germans, and the Germans found it a technology a bit too far ahead in the future and too expensive for them to kind of imply. And here is a country with autobahns and so on and so forth. The Chinese put it up. The train goes up to about 423 kilometers an hour each time it goes across, but it goes empty because it's just too
Yeah, because
expensive.
yeah, it's too expensive, and today people might don't have jobs. I mean, we think something else, but on ground, the things which come out, are you read the South China Morning Post. You don't have to read everything. You just read the headlines down the line, and you come across these things.
Mm.
And then you get the feeling that not everything is hunky dory.
They're saying so.
Yeah, and it's their newspaper, not mine.
So, closing, India was one of the, I think, the only country in the world that said no to the BRI and a flat out no. US, okay, fair enough. I mean, I don't think they came out and gave a very clear response. But in this very region where the Chinese were interested in India in terms of the Kolkata port and so on and so forth, India was one of the only countries that said no. Uh, we were put aside for a long time, but now people turn around and realize and say this openly that India said no. What was the reasoning at that time that you see today that we took that decision?
See, right from the beginning, I think our government, the previous government and this government were very clear that BRI is no. We would not get into it. It's a strategic decision, right? And you can't get into a BRI when the same BRI is the flagship in Pakistan. You know, there's that angle. And it is this BRI, this string of pearls is nothing but is a different form of BRI as it is. So how do you become part of it? Then you collapse. So there's no way we could have taken it over. The Chinese were very clear. Let me tell you, if India had committed itself to the BRI itself might have been successful.
Probably the only country which would repay China.
No, no, forget repayment. It would have been a success story.
Yeah.
Okay. Because India was against it, many people started hedging bets. Okay. And that's why we never took it. And as things happened, and then we started seeing the way Pakistan was dealing with China, we understood this BRI better. Mind you, in 2016-17, I was at that time analyzing the CPEC in a great detail, and there's not much news about BRI. And I felt that there's something awfully wrong with this whole system. I was writing then. It's coming true now. Okay. And at that time, I remember the Chinese government were gung ho. They even told the Indian government, no, no, you don't be part of the BRI. We'll have a separate road for you. We'll have a separate Silk Road, India China Silk Road type. We said no, which is a wise decision. Right now, well, let them do what they want with their BRI.
I think this has been a very, very short and crisp conversation about the BRI, which is a very large project. I think we'll follow it up with some certain developments as they go by, especially in the neighborhood in the series called the Neighborhood Watch. Having said that, it also throws a certain amount of light as to what the Chinese were thinking when they got into these projects, how they did their risk assessment and went, probably wrong in their judgment of the balance that they wanted to create between geostrategy and geoeconomics. They've excuse me, how they've not been able to reach their milestones that they created for themselves. And I think one of the biggest things, and I think we've mentioned this before, uh, the dot on the map or the dot on the XY graph, which is going to change everything for China, is going to be the COVID-19 pandemic. It is that
Yeah,
is going to make the difference. So there's going to be a pre-COVID era and a post-COVID era. History is going to be defined that way. And I think the Chinese are going to look at it as well. Thanks, sir, for this conversation.
quite interesting that we spoke about it. And it's interesting that you speak about the pre-COVID era and the post-pandemic era. We're seeing a new history being scripted. Uh, I see a good history for a good future for India, right? The way we have this thing. Let's see how things pan out for China, right? Because China has gone on a different trajectory altogether in this post-COVID period. We've discussed about it, and now that Xi Jinping is almost sure to be the boss of China for life. There are interesting times ahead with the economy going down, and militarily he's still got a lot of ambitions. Maybe some other day we could discuss it. We could discuss their military.
I think we'll leave that as a hint for our next series that is going to come up for the audience to kind of judge. What we are trying to do is judge across all aspects of China to understand what they're all about. I think a holistic study of an adversary or as a threat,
Yeah,
as the CDS calls it today, as the number one threat. Um, it's important for us to understand all aspects of it so that we as people can put our two bits into containing China. Let me find, for the I think the best word would be to contain China. Thanks, sir. Till next time for another subject on our favorite topic, China. Jai Hind.
Jai Hind. Thank you.